Something doesn't like the light. Crazy how well it's hidden under this leaf. This is one of the big millipedes. Not the biggest I've seen. This looks like a 4-incher. I don't know if they're poisonous or not. Well, maybe like there's an 1.5 inches. Yeah, probably about 4 inches. 3 3/4 to 4. Oh, here we go. Now he's moving. Seen them 6 inches. Those are rare. Yeah, we're at 4. Pretty easy peasy. Yeah, my finger. Nice dark woods. Find a lot of cover. You're gonna have to burrow into the leaves soon. Winters are so mild, they can get big like that. Frogs will go all winter long, just chirping. Every few weeks in winter, get a sunny day that's 40-50 degrees, you know, and it never really gets too cold. 15 degrees, I think, was the coldest it got last year at night. So the frogs and things come out on those 40-50 degree days, and I don't know what they do, what they're eating, you know, eating each other, I guess. Not bad. It wasn't that good. Had to do some tremulations to get it sitting tight like that. Kind of those tremulations are like a 1/4 inch off this, 2 inch off that. And a 1/4 inch off. It's got the beam and then the ridge board. And those are just temporarily holding the ridge board. As is, this ridge board is just floating. It's just floating on the beam. Held in place by these things. You kind of see, you know, the little tiny bird's mouth at the end. Resting on the beam, kind of centers the ridge board on the beam. Yeah, so this video is going to be getting this far. You know, I got I was gonna do my blocks every 6 foot because that would use up the scrap. But I decided, you know, it's standard to go every 4 foot. Well, 4 floor, you know, so I got 1, 2, 3, so it's more or less every 4 foot. And the insulation comes in 4 foot sections, you know, so I figured what the hey, you know, let's just go standard on it, you know. But it does mean, you know, having just 2 blocks, that was the scrap from this. You know, I get 1 block. This is a scrap from a 16-footer. I get 1 block, 2 block, and then this is the actual scrap, you know. That's all the scrap from a 16-footer, you know. But doing a 3rd block means I need, I'm gonna get 6 more 10-foot, 6 more 10-foot 2x10s, 2x12s, 6 more 10-foot 2x12s. You know, it's gonna take to add that 3rd block, you know, to go every 4. But I figure you might as well, you know, just keep everything nice and solid. So it'll be, you know, video is getting this far, putting the ridge up, the first 6, putting in my cross overhangs. So I got an overhang every 2 foot. Got some strapping right there. There's strapping on the tops of it, you know, you can't see. I really don't want to go up there to video it just yet, but putting on the overhang extensions. Yeah, putting in those, and I put in these. These are just loose fit. Oh, I got some more metals. Kind of holding those in place. Cutting, you know, those things. Getting to this point. And then probably installing those.
That changed this June, when Hong Kong introduced the bill that would allow mainland China to extradite people from Hong Kong to be tried and punished in China under Chinese law. This was seen as a new and very menacing encroachment on the rights of Hong Kong citizens. Since 1997, they've been ruled by Hong Kong laws and Hong Kong courts, where everybody is presumed innocent, with the rights we know in most democratic countries. Now anybody could get thrown into the prisons and courts of communist China.
I would say that was the time when I first feel awakened, when I'm truly understanding what's happening, when I first go to the march of the no extradition bill. And I was very, very emotional at that time because, like, there is only around 7 million people in Hong Kong, but 1 million walk on the street with the same demand, with the same wish of, like, hoping Hong Kong to remain its current state.
Wanting Hong Kong to stay like it is, with its own laws separate from China. A week later, 2 million people came out.
At the time I was feeling very, oh my god, this is so touching, like, why is people so united? And then the next second, the government just declares that, oh, we heard your voice, but we will be continuing on the bill on Tuesday. So that was like a really big contrast. And like in the morning, you see how peaceful things were, but at night, you see the police coming out and start brutally hitting people. I was like, it was really unforgettable to me, because that was the first time when I witnessed with my real eyes that the police is chasing people. They are chasing students who did not do anything and start to beat them and arrest them.
Other 22-year-olds also told us how radicalizing it's been to see police tear gassing and beating peaceful protesters. And at this point, I didn't understand this before we got to Hong Kong. A lot of the emotion driving the protests is just about the police.
Because the government is supporting them to do such things, and there is no penalty for them, even if they are doing things that are completely unacceptable to everyone.
Of course, nobody knows where this is going to lead by 2047, when China fully takes over Hong Kong. But for Catherine and lots of other people her age, things were starting to feel pretty ominous. Was Hong Kong going to become just like any other Chinese city run by the communists? When you're 50, what do you picture life here will be like?
I can picture that I would be super depressed because I super like comment on political thing. I really cannot imagine the day that I cannot speak freely on internet, that we do not have the freedom of speech anymore. And I cannot imagine that there will come a day me and my friends commenting on the government would become a crime.
And you think that would happen?
Yes, I do. When, like, all the things that is happening in mainland China now, especially I would say in where is it? Xinjiang?
Xinjiang.
Yeah, what is happening in Xinjiang will happen in Hong Kong.
She's talking about internment camps, where the Chinese are holding perhaps 1 million Uyghurs and others.
They say it's re-education, but it's basically a concentration camp. They put people who do not agree with the government into the concentration camp and educate them, and they got monitored wherever and whenever they go. Everywhere is police. Police monitors everybody's move, and I do think that if we do not fight for our future, there will come a day Hong Kong will become like Xinjiang.
Because she's politically active, this does not feel like an abstract threat. When these 22-year-olds picture who China is going to crack down on, it's them. Ashley's also in her first job out of college. She works at a bank.
Who knows whatever they would do to us? And under the extradition bill, who knows where we will go, what time we will disappear. That's what we fear of.
Ashley's heard of the social credit system that China has started to monitor and rate its citizens. She fears that if China decides that you're anti-government, it'll make it impossible for you to get the job you want, a rise in society. And the devices that China uses to monitor its population, an estimated 200 million surveillance cameras around the country with facial recognition software. They've been going up around Hong Kong, tens of thousands of them. This is something else I didn't understand before I came to Hong Kong. The protesters like Ashley and Catherine don't just fear what's going to happen in the future with extradition laws or losing the internet or losing free speech. In their daily lives right now, they believe they're watching China already transforming Hong Kong, making it less like the Hong Kong they know, more like the mainland. Catherine points to changes in the public school curricula. Like she says, her 7-year-old nephew is speaking Mandarin in school 5 days a week. It didn't happen when she was a kid. Mandarin's what they speak in mainland China. In Hong Kong, people mostly speak in Cantonese and in English.
So all the Chinese classes are conducted in Mandarin. So he speaks Mandarin every day, basically. He speaks Mandarin better than English.
Can you explain a little bit like why Cantonese is so important?
Cantonese is more like an identity to us.
It's part of it makes Hong Kong. Another change is that she's seeing right now in Hong Kong. She's upset at all the mainlanders moving there, in her neighborhood, and university students that she and her friends have kept at college. The total who've moved to Hong Kong is over 1 million mainlanders since 1997. And, okay, just a quick heads up, in our interviews with these 22-year-olds, get them started on the subject of mainlanders and get ready for a wave of totally bigoted opinions.
So, especially I live in new territories, so all the people surrounding you, you hear Mandarin, and then you start to see those less educated people, they're squatting next to the streets. I did witness mainland lady having her children at the road, and I always hear mainland people yelling, shouting out for nothing in the mall, and they jump into the line, everything. This bothered me a lot.
Squatting? What do you mean squatting?
I don't know, they just squat on the roadside waiting people.
They just sit and squat and wait.
Yeah. For nothing. They can squat for an hour.
People in Hong Kong don't do that.
Yeah, we don't, because who would squat at the road? Why you can't just stand? Or why you can't just sit?
They're more comfortable.
It just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look civilized.
So for all the alarm that Catherine and the cursed generation feel about the future, the parents are often not as alarmed about China taking more control of Hong Kong and about what the island's going to be like in 2047. Like Ashley's parents. They hate her going out to protests every weekend.
I mean, for my parents, we really had some very serious fights.
And they think we'll just let China take over Hong Kong, it'll be fine?
I think for my parents, some of the older generation just don't believe, or they are not brave enough to open up their eyes and see what is actually going to happen. They just feel like they did not do anything wrong. As long as you did not do anything wrong, then you'll be fine.
What's galling about this for Ashley is that she feels like she's being the responsible one, fighting for everybody's future. And they're telling her not to protest. She was like, maybe if her parents had done this themselves years ago, things wouldn't be so bad today.
Like, I'm 22 years old, and in the past, when I was younger, they have never stood up like us or fight like us to ask for what they are promised in 1997.
It's funny, when you talk about it, you're mad at your parents about it.
I just feel like, I don't understand why they would not want these rights, or why they don't think that something bad is gonna happen in the next 50 years.
So, Ashley and Catherine and so many others, they've kind of given over their lives to protesting. They work during the week, protest on the weekends. They say they don't have much time in their lives for much else. But what's interesting is, they don't think it's going to work. Most of our interviewees told us that. They don't think China is going to give in. Again, here's Catherine.
I am pretty much pessimistic, actually. I do wish that one day we all succeed. We want a democratic Hong Kong, but now I just don't see a way out. Like, it's been 3 months. We've been trying each and every step. We've broke into the Legislative Council. We have more than 1,000 people got arrested. But the government is still trying to ignore all of this.
If you feel so pessimistic about the results, like why still go? Like, why are you still going out every weekend?
At least the government see that we are not that, how do we say, we are not that obedient. So we have to continuously tell the government that we are not satisfied with what they are giving us. So we have to do it.
Again, here's Dorothy.
I think if we have to lose, we need to leave our true thoughts in history. We need to let the people behind us know that we've tried.
2047 is coming. And this is a very grand thing to say, but so many of these cursed generation kids feel like they have a special destiny.
If we were born earlier, probably I would become my dad and mom. And if I were born later, I would probably become those little kids speaking Mandarin better than Cantonese. So I am happy that I am born in 1997. We are in the middle. We have the chance to know what is freedom, and we are experiencing that our freedom is being taken away. And that's why we are the group who step up first to fight for it. I think we are getting off here.
After an hour bus ride, we get to the protest. This is Act 2, the fight. Once we're off the bus, Catherine ducks into a public restroom and comes out in black shirt, black pants, black mask over her face, hair pulled back in a ponytail. Then we head onto a street where we're surrounded by hundreds of people dressed exactly like her. A big shopping district, the stores closed. And no cars. All the side streets have been blocked off with barricades by the protesters. Scaffolding and fencing, trash cans, and orange construction cones piled in the street. They do an efficient job. We meet up with Catherine's friends by a big Victoria's Secret store.
My friend KK.
KK.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. My name is Hugo. Hugo.
Hugo.
Yes.
Very nice to meet you.
The couple who always kiss in front of me. What? I'm Lauren.
For the record, I'm with them all afternoon. No kissing at all. The city is giving permission for fewer protests these days, and this is an unsanctioned demonstration we're at, which means that everybody here is breaking the law. Anyone is subject to arrest, which affects crowd size. Maximum penalty is 5 years. 10 years if you're convicted of rioting, which is why other protesters are so scared of getting arrested all the time. But despite that, the beginning of the protest has the feeling of a block party. People strolling, chatting. You see a few parents and kids. Some non-protesters cut through the crowd running errands. But an hour into all this, I look around and realize no families, no kids. It's not feeling like a block party at all. People are standing on top of fences trying to see what's ahead of us. They're starting to put on gas masks. Describe what you're seeing.
The protesters in the Tama Street moving backwards. So we assume that there are riot police on the other end of the road. Oh, there is tear gas fired over there.
It's like 2 or 3 blocks away. We walk towards the police and the tear gas, where hundreds of protesters are massed on a side street. The police are just half a block away, but we can't really see them through the crowd. And then a whole wave of tear gas canisters arcs towards us, hits us. Tear gas. And lots of people, us included, are back a ways, half block away. Catherine calmly administers saline solution in a stranger's eyes. The controls of my recorder got knocked around running through the smoke, so I do not have a decent recording of that. This is the role that she's assigned herself in the protest. First aid, helping anybody who requires it. She even brought energy candies specifically to give out to people whose energy is flagging. After being driven back, Catherine and Hugo and KK and I wait for the smoke to clear. So this happens at every protest?
Yes.
Basically.
So what do we do now?
We tidy up ourselves and go again.
And when you get to the police, what are you going to do?
We're gonna stand in front of them. If have chance, we're going to fight them back. Our goal is to make them to retreat their front line.
After a couple minutes, we head back toward the front line. Okay, we're walking forward towards the corner where it's this blue.
Pick this up.
And then we wait around.
Don't take it
The
off.
water cannon goes off, blasting water that is dyed blue, laced with stuff that stings your skin. More tear gas. And we pull back a little. Then we move forward, wait again. This is both suspenseful and boring.
Sometimes there's not always a purpose. Sometimes we standing at the back is just as a support. We just add as a support to those at the front.
Support, like if something happens, you'll do first aid?
Something like this, but also they know that there are many people behind them. It is important to give them some mental support as well. Yeah.
So many protesters are like Catherine. They feel like it's their job to support the people at the front, who are the hardcore ones, who push back against police and throw Molotov cocktails and chase police with sticks and metal rods and tear stuff down to build barriers to slow the police, wearing full gear, helmets, goggles, and gas masks and gloves. Finally, the frontliners yell that they want room to retreat, and so we need to retreat. And so we fall way back, a couple blocks. So now we're just standing here.
Yeah, because we always support, our existence is like a support to those in the front line.
But I don't understand. Like, so the police want us out of there.
Yeah.
They push, they fire tear gas, they spray blue water on everybody. We move back, and then we stand here. And what's our goal?
This has been a very frequently asked question. Nowadays, we're just trying to stand on our own ground, not to be dispersed that easily.
That's it. Just the goal is to just stay out as long as you can,
Yeah.
and then eventually the police will push you off the street. So in other words, it's exactly like the entire protest movement leading to 2047. Just try to slow them down as much as you can.
Yes.
In the end, China will win, but for as long as you can, you'll just stand here in the street.
It is pretty sad to say so, but yes, that's pretty much accurate. Yeah, that's.
What are they yelling?
They ask people to start moving.
And there we head into a massive retreat as the police advance towards us. And for the first time, there seems to be actual, real fear. We're running down streets and side roads. We get separated from Catherine's friends and from Emmanuel, dodging the police, and finally taking refuge in a church. There are safe houses like this around Hong Kong that protesters duck into. It takes over an hour. Finally, the coast is clear, and Catherine calls a friend to pick her up. They're volunteer drivers for the protesters, part of the infrastructure they've created. Catherine changes out of her black t-shirt into civilian clothes. No makeup, but she's too tired, she says. And no need if she's getting picked up.
Bye.
She heads home.
Say goodbye to Emmanuel for me as well. Thank you.
As her car pulled away, across the street on Queens Road, there was an endless row of police vehicles headed in the other direction, just dozens of them, blue and red lights flashing. And as the night went on, things became violent. A woman approached us on the sidewalk, upset about police beating somebody, and showed us video that she'd shot of it. And the protesters were violent as well. The newspapers had accounts of 6 of them beating up a middle-aged man, kicking and shouting at him. They set fire to a subway station. They do that a lot, because lots of protesters think Hong Kong's subway, the MTR, colludes with police. That's why Catherine prefers the bus, even though it's less convenient. Every protester we interviewed supports the violence. They support it because they feel like they have no other options, that it's the only way they can get the government to respond to them. Fu told us back in June they marched peacefully against the extradition bill and got nothing. Then they got violent and the bill was withdrawn. It worked. And violence has become a way to defend themselves. Setting fires and building barricades slows police who are coming after them. So they support the violence, or they at least understand it. Emmanuel talked to them about that. We're at Act 3 of our show on civil disobedience. Here's Emmanuel.
When I started asking protesters about violence, a couple of them said, "We're not violent like Americans. Our tolerance for it is much lower." So getting to this point, to being okay with violence, isn't something we did lightly. And a lot of them explained to me that they didn't always think radical tactics were okay. What changed their opinion was the way police responded to peaceful protest. That being shot at with water cannons, tear gassed, seeing someone knocked unconscious, beaten with batons, handcuffed and kicked, groups of thugs beating and attacking people with hammers, clubs, and knives, watching all this and being subjected to it. That's what got a lot of people on board with violence. Now, some protesters throw Molotov cocktails, vandalize buildings, and chase police with sticks and rods. Ira and I talked with one protester, Yuan.
Do you think it would be acceptable for the protesters to kill police?
I hope they do so.
You do?
I do.
If police died, what do you think would happen next?
We will die too. Protesters will die too.
And if things get that violent between the protesters and the police, and protesters are being killed, do you think Hong Kong will get democracy?
I can't tell at the moment.
So many people we talked with expected someone to die, a protester or police officer. Most thought it would help the movement put pressure on the government. This hasn't happened yet, but destruction and violence are giving way to bizarre scenes throughout the city. My coworker Diane and I went to this protest at a mall, one of many in Hong Kong. Sometimes the entire city can feel like one giant shiny shopping mall, connected by subway. The stores are all open, the mall is full of people, but not many people are shopping. The entire premise of this protest is to go to the mall and not shop. The mall is 5 stories. Each tier has railings that look out over a central atrium. There are families, kids, older folks. Some people are in black, others are just in their regular day clothes. They chant, they sing the protester anthem, Glory to Hong Kong, over and over. At one point, someone starts handing out paper, and suddenly hundreds of people are folding paper cranes. Then, an act of gentle vandalism. There's this machine that prints out reservation receipts for the restaurant called Jade Garden. The protesters hijack it, forcing it to spit out hundreds of receipts. They tape the receipts together and string them from one end of the atrium to the other and back again a few times. They target Jade Garden because one of the company's founders has a daughter who supports Beijing. That's how far things have gone in Hong Kong. Businesses are labeled either yellow or blue. Yellow for the ones that support the protesters, blue for the police and government. There's even a Google map that tells you if a business is one or the other. Soon, things in the mall start to shift. Diane and I watch a group of about a dozen protesters enter a pro-China bakery, owned by the same company that owns Jade Garden. They start taunting the staff.
There's umbrellas up.
They're like blocking so you can't really see inside of it.
Is the person who works in there still in there?
Yeah, she is, well, she was a minute ago.
Okay, something fell.
They knocked over a display. Before things can escalate any further, the workers force the protesters out, close the store gates, and barricade themselves in. A restless energy takes over. It's like the protesters are looking for something to confront, something to disturb. But the thing they're fighting against is the existential threat of China. And that's not really in the mall. They march to more pro-China businesses in the mall. The alarm starts going off. And a PA announcement says, "The mall is very crowded. Please be careful." Then word comes police are on their way. And some mood that feels like a mix of fear and adrenaline fills the space. Protesters begin to build barriers out of whatever is not nailed to the ground, blocking doorways, creating obstacles. They want to stop the police from entering from the subway entrance of the mall. They start throwing trash cans down the escalators. A group rips a 6-foot TV screen out of a wall to use as part of a blockade. The PA announcement remains the same. Please be careful, the mall is very crowded. They open an emergency fire hose. Someone brings giant jugs of oil, which they add to the water. The tile floor of the mall lobby is now a little lake that police will have to cross. A woman slips and falls. And while all this destruction is happening, the shoppers, the older folks, even a few families, they don't leave. They're on the upper levels of the mall looking over the railing like they're watching a sporting event or something. I'm super uncomfortable. The protester next to us, Chan, is so chill. Have you been to a protest like this before?
Yeah.
Does this feel normal?
Yeah.
Is that weird that it's normal though?
Yes, but it's been 100 days, so...
There's this thing that protesters say to each other. Never sever ties. Sometimes they even say, never sever ties, even if there's a nuclear explosion. Basically, if another protester does something you disagree with, say, set something on fire, beat someone up, you don't criticize them or cut them off. The police eventually come, but they meet the protesters outside the mall. They throw tear gas. Protesters throw a Molotov cocktail. Smoke and gas waft through Snoopy World, a mini theme park on one of the mall's upper levels. Giant statues of Linus and Peppermint Patty, along with dozens of shoppers and protesters who line the outdoor balconies, all watch the confrontation between police and protesters unfold below.
Emmanuel Berry, one of the producers of our show. Coming up, you're a protester. You think the police are utterly immoral and undefendable. So, what do you do about the cop who happens to be your dad? That's in a minute from Chicago Public Radio when our program continues.
She was just 16 years old when she was sentenced to life in prison for killing a much older man who had bought her for sex. But a filmmaker, activist, and celebrities rallied to her defense, and now Cyntoia Brown is free and telling her story.
I had always believed that I would be free someday.
Cyntoia Brown, in her own words, that and the latest on impeachment and Brexit on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Hear All Things Considered this afternoon at 4. Support comes from Murray State Cinema International, presenting Japanese-language film Shoplifters this week. On the margins of Tokyo, a dysfunctional band of outsiders is united by fierce loyalty and a penchant for petty theft. There's a free community show tonight at 7:30 in the Curris Center Theater. You're listening to Murray State's 91.3 WKMS. Become a sustaining member today at WKMS.org.
This American Life, Myra Glass. Today's program, Umbrellas Up. Stories from Hong Kong and what it's like for people to live through over 100 days of protest there. I traveled to Hong Kong with my co-workers Diane Wu and Emmanuel Berry. We have arrived at Act 4 of our show, Act 4, Good Cop, Dad Cop. So as an American visiting Hong Kong for the first time, one of the things that kind of killed me was hearing that before the last few years of protests, people were really into the police. Like, they were trusted, they were respected. And it was only the last few years, especially the last few months of protests, that changed all that. And feelings about who to side with, the police or the protesters, they've gotten so intense, it's tearing families apart. On the Telegram app, there's a whole channel for protesters who get kicked out by their parents and need a place to live. Alan Yu grew up in Hong Kong. He knows a family that is very far apart on this. The son is a protester. The dad is a retired police officer. And Alan had them sit down and do what nobody in Hong Kong is doing. talk to each other. There was really no dialogue between police and protesters anywhere in Hong Kong, as far as we could tell. Here's Alan.
I've known this family since I was 6. I knew them because of my friend, Jonathan. I rode the school bus with him every day. His father, Peter, was the first policeman I knew in real life. I was excited to talk to him because you never hear what the police think about the protests. Police here are not really allowed to talk to the press. Peter's retired, but still very connected to the force. So, before the family all sat down together, I asked Peter to get together with me and my producer Emmanuel. I hadn't seen him since I was 12. Back then, people called me Yudan, which means fishball, because the Cantonese for fish sounds like my surname Yu, and because I was fat.
I won't recognize you on the street. I won't.
Okay.
Serious, I'm serious.
Okay, alright, I guess that's a compliment, thank you.
He used to be very cute.
Yeah, how?
He used to be very fat.
As a kid, I liked Peter. He'd take time off work to stop by during recess and buy us chips and other snacks. My friend Jonathan would have his birthday parties at the police station, which we loved. Big barbecues, other policemen around. Peter was the cool dad. People in Hong Kong trusted, even revered the police back then. One of the most popular TV shows was a cop show, 陀槍師姐, where the police were heroes. Peter's hair is grey now. He's tall, athletic, he plays tennis.
My nickname in tennis, I don't know why. My nickname in tennis is Federer. Yeah. Federer?
Are you good?
Federer, Roger?
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe my skill, I don't know why.
He still likes his dad jokes. I cannot imagine Peter ever doing what I've been seeing in these videos, beating up unarmed protesters, kicking people on the ground. I thought surely he would object to some of those things, and that his views would be complicated. From what you've seen, in recent months, has there been anything that the police have done that you think you would disagree with?
Nothing is perfect. But as a whole, in general, I think the police are doing a pretty good job. If it is in other police force in other countries, just look at the casualties. Just look at the column of fatal, numbers. It won't be zero.
I ask him about different situations the police have been criticized for. I even show him videos of police brutally arresting people, things I think are clearly wrong. But he always seems to have a justification for the way police behave. He says, you're judging the police based on what you see in these clips. That's not fair. You don't know what the officer was facing.
The social media only show the part that police hitting people. But 1 minute ago, they be attacked by lots of people. So 1 minute later, they react to the mob, attacking them. So what you can see is 1 minute after, but you did not see the full picture. So
he's not conflicted about police, and he isn't very sympathetic to protesters. He thinks the protests are destroying Hong Kong. The extradition bill is okay. He doesn't think China will end free speech in Hong Kong. And protesters' fear of China is way overblown and naive.
Hong Kong is part of China. Come on, wake up, people, wake up. This is the fact. Whether China is good or bad, Hong Kong is part of China. If you don't like it, those people waving the United States flag, waving the Union Jack flag, if England takes you, you can go to England. Yeah. You can go to Florida, go to California. Yeah, go. If Trump takes you, yeah, go.
I'd already been worried how this family conversation was going to go. Hearing what Peter believed did not help. Peter told me he understands that Jonathan goes to protests, but doesn't ask him about it, because he doesn't want any details. Jonathan said he does not ask his dad what he thinks of the way police beat and tear gas protesters, for the same reason.
It's just like if he says something. If he has something that's like completely doesn't make sense to me. It sort of brings him down. Like as a person, he's just like I would feel like he's just not who I thought he was. Yeah.
And it like scares you to like think that could be true.
So this family does not talk about the protests at all. Tennis, yes. Soccer, yes. Pets, great. But no politics. Till tonight. They've agreed to have the conversation they've been avoiding after dinner. Jonathan's mom, Alba, washes the dishes. I recognize the song right away. I'm surprised she's humming it in front of Peter. It's the protesters' new anthem, Glory to Hong Kong. Alpha is on Jonathan's side. She works with lawyers, including some in the pro-democracy camp. I ask if Peter knows what that song is. She says, maybe. That's kind of how it's been going between her and her husband. No real discussion, but the occasional passive-aggressive comment while they're watching the news, or some passive-aggressive humming during dishes. This is another reason Jonathan avoids bringing up the protests. He doesn't want to start a fight between his parents. What would the worst scenario be like?
Someone moving out, I guess. Yeah, because they can't stand it anymore. Yeah, I guess living apart would be the worst case scenario, I believe. Because that, like, sort of unofficially means that you're no longer together, sort of, yeah.
That could be his mom, or his dad, or him. We all sit at the dinner table. Peter's facing me, and Jonathan and Alva are next to me. Jonathan has their dog Loki, named after the Marvel character, on his lap. The conversation starts, with all of them saying in different ways, it's fine that we don't talk about this. We all have mutual respect. Instead of talking to each other, or looking at each other, they're talking to me, or looking at the dog. It feels all very careful, proper, and calm. This continues for half an hour. Then everything changes when Peter uses the word compromise. Compromise. It's basically the government line. That's what Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam says, that the protesters should stop protesting. And after that, the two sides can talk. Alpha and Jonathan hear that as meaning the protesters should back down. They both lay into Peter.
即係你話示威真係唔啱咁警察又係咪啱晒咧？咁係咯。
同埋一樣嘢就係你話你兩者打交，但係你個裝備完全唔對等。
Alpha says the police are the ones who need to change. They have to calm the situation. Peter says the police are doing their job. I don't know why when the police arrest people for fighting or breaking stuff, it's treated as weird. It's illegal, so arrest them. No problem. Jonathan says, okay, yes, arrest them. But how much force does the police need to use? Sometimes a person just asks the police a question, and they still get arrested or beaten. Or people who are already on the ground, kneeling, subdued, they still get beaten. Peter doesn't respond. Then they argue, openly argue for the first time, about one of the protesters' main demands, something the government refused to budge on, to start an independent investigation into police behavior. Peter keeps repeating the same thing over and over, like he's been backed into a corner, that there's no need for an independent investigation. Now is not the right time. The city already has a system in place to investigate complaints about the police. They talk a little longer, but it doesn't go anywhere. later, she had other things she could have brought up, but decided against it. She didn't want her husband to feel trapped. The word she used was 死角, which translates as dead corner, no place to go. Prison was important to her than trying to win an argument. Later, Jonathan told me he still loves his dad, but he's given up hope that his father could be a reasonable human being, at least when it comes to the police. When I started this, I was kind of naive. I thought maybe Jonathan and his mother and father, people who actually want to understand each other, could talk about this in a productive manner. And that if they could, maybe there was hope that the rest of us could. But now, I don't have a lot of hope.
Alan Yu is normally a reporter for WHYY's show, The Pulse. Tag 5, 2 weeks later. So when we first got to Hong Kong in September, everybody we talked to warned us October 1st might be a big day. It would be the 70th anniversary of the Communist Party founding the modern Chinese state. China did not want to be embarrassed by demonstrations in Hong Kong, and protesters wondered what kind of crackdown was going to come on October 1st, or maybe in the days before it. And sure enough, the weekend before October 1st, there were tons of police, undercover cops posing as protesters, a surge in arrests. And then on October 1st, this thing happened that several of our interviews had predicted was going to happen at some point. For the first time, a protester was shot with a real bullet, a teenager. And in the days since, things just descended. The government banned wearing face masks in public, which then caused a huge backlash in the streets. Another teenager, a 14-year-old, was shot by police. A bomb went off next to a police car. Catherine, the protester that I went to the demonstration with in mid-September, she went to all those protests before October 1st. Then she was out on October 1st. And our coworker, Diane Wu, caught up with her the day after that, on October 2nd, to see how she was doing, and also just to see what she made of it all. Anyway, here's Diane.
I met up with Catherine at the MTR station in Chunwan on a Wednesday. She'd taken the MTR only because she was in a big rush to meet me after work. You had a long day?
Yeah, very long one. It is a really sad day after yesterday.
She's talking about the protester who was shot. It actually happened just a short walk from where we're standing. The last few days of protest had been especially bad. Catherine was in the middle of the crowd when dozens of special tactics police officers exploded out of a hidden door, sprinting after protesters and tackling them to the ground. People hadn't seen this before. It caused a wave of panic. Everyone fled in terror, including Catherine. Her phone was flooded with images of arrested protesters, pinned on the ground by riot police, face down with their wrists tied behind them. Later, she met her friend KK, the one who makes out with her boyfriend all the time at protests, and found out that in the rush she got entrapped. She came really close to getting arrested.
All of a sudden, everything was so close to me. A very important friend of mine nearly getting arrested, and all the pictures and footages I could see after the day, everything just was just too much for me.
Yeah. It was too close.
Yeah.
Catherine's deeply fearful of getting arrested. Remember, it could mean years in prison. After all of that, on October 1st, she was almost too scared to go protest, but braved it anyways. Then, police started to fire tear gas at people up ahead of them.
We were on our way walking from Chunwan to Kwai Fong, and I realized that I couldn't keep walking. I started to realize that I just feel different. Like 2 weeks ago when I was with Ara, I could still feel it is safe to run. I'm going to be fine, and I could still run without any hesitation. But yesterday, I just feel like I was so terrified. I started to shake from the inner side, and I didn't know what to do.
She panicked, started crying. Her boyfriend helped her get home.
So I had to leave yesterday. But then, actually on my way home, there was a friend of mine. I think he was just joking and say, "You left your teammate behind." He sent this to me. Yeah, so I was immediately crying. I cried out immediately and really could not control myself because I didn't want this. I don't want to leave my teammates behind. I don't want to leave anyone behind, but I don't want to be a burden. In the old times, I could be so brave. I could be fighting with them, and then all of a sudden yesterday, I couldn't do anything at all.
The police strategy of clamping down on the protests by outlawing almost all of them, then flooding the streets with riot police and arresting tons of people. This is the toll it's taking on people. And, of course, this is one way the whole thing could end. Maybe it'll scare people off.
Oh, I saw my boyfriend.
Her boyfriend, Joe, shows up.
Hi, nice to meet you.
He's got his shirt tucked in, a new protest tactic from this weekend. The idea is to try and expose undercover police who wouldn't be able to tuck their shirts in over their guns and batons. Joe's here for moral support because, incredibly, Catherine is now on her way to another protest.
Headed over to the football pitch? Yeah.
We're headed to a soccer stadium across the street from where the protester was shot. Catherine figures she'll stay as long as she can tolerate. We walk onto the field. It's a big, solemn group of people in their work and school clothes, all facing the bleachers.
There are a lot of people, not sure what they are looking at, but I think they are just waiting for a moment to mourn.
It's a kind of vigil for the protester in the hospital. Catherine and Joe put on black surgical masks. Everyone has their phones up with their lights on. It's the protest anthem. We go into the streets. Catherine's on edge. Every time she hears a loud noise, she squeezes Joe's hand. She'll stay out until 10:30. Then she'll get dinner, go home, go to bed. In the morning, Catherine will be at work again, at her job where she can't let her bosses know where she was the night before. Overnight, the road cleaners will come out with backhoes to clear the barricades. They'll paint over the graffiti, fix the smashed streetlights, tidy up the piles of bricks in the gutters, erasing the protests as they have so many days before, turning the city back to normal. Except, of course, it can't be normal again.
Diane Wu is the managing editor of our program.
Now that it's raining more than ever, know that we still have each other. You can stand under my umbrella. You can stand under my umbrella.
Our program was produced today by Emmanuel Berry and Diane Wu. Our brilliant field producer in Hong Kong was Yenny Chan. Thank